Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're opening up a stack of documents, basically centered on BioNTech's Q1 2026 financial results and their latest corporate update.
Yeah, it's quite a read. There's a lot to get through.
There really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to trace the anatomy of this massive, almost unprecedented corporate evolution.
Right, because we're looking at how a company that essentially cured the global pandemic is taking that historic windfall and, well, placing every single chip on the table.
Exactly. They're trying to conquer the hardest, most complex challenge in the history of medicine, which is oncology.
Curing cancer, yeah.
Because when you read through these Q1 2026 sources, you're just hit with this incredible high-stakes tension.
Oh, absolutely. The contrast is sharp.
Right. You have this multi-billion-dollar war chest on one hand and some clinical trial data in advanced cancers that is, frankly, jaw-dropping.
But then to fund that science, you also have a company actively dismantling parts of the very empire that made it famous in the first place.
Yeah, laying people off, closing plants. Engine that makes a pivot of this magnitude even possible.
So the financials, they're really the scaffolding for everything else we're going to discuss today.
Right.
Looking at the Q1 2026 numbers, BioNTech reported revenues of 118.1 million euros.
Which is down.
Yeah, that is a noticeable step down from the 182.8 million euros they posted in the same quarter of 2025.
Which makes sense, you know? The market has fully transitioned out of the pandemic emergency phase at this point.
Definitely.
COVID-19 vaccines in the US and Europe have essentially normalized into a seasonal market. It's much like the flu shot now.
Exactly. It's predictable. And despite that Q1 drop, they completely reaffirmed their full year 2026 revenue guidance.
Which was what, like 2 billion?
Yeah, 2.0 to 2.3 billion euros. So they clearly have a stable baseline.
Right. But the revenue isn't the number in these documents that made my jaw drop. It's the cash reserve.
Oh, the war chest.
Yeah. 16.8 billion euros.
16.8 billion euros in cash, cash equivalents, and security investments.
That is just an insane amount of money.
To put that into perspective for you, in the biopharmaceutical industry, you have thousands of biotech startups out there.
Right.
And their entire existence depends on scraping together maybe $50 or $100 million just to survive a single phase 2 trial.
Yeah, they're constantly begging for funding.
Exactly. Meanwhile, BioNTech is operating with the GDP of a small nation just sitting in their bank account.
And what's wild is that they are actively burning it. While their revenue stabilized downward, their R&D expenses actually went up.
Yeah, increased to 557 million euros for just this one quarter.
Just one quarter. They're aggressively pushing cash into the furnace of their immuno-oncology and antibody-drug conjugate programs.
It's a massive capital allocation.
Looking at it, it reminds me of a visionary movie director. Like, imagine an indie director who unexpectedly creates a billion-dollar global blockbuster.
Right, like the COVID vaccine in this case.
Exactly. But instead of just making safe, predictable sequels for the next decade, they take that massive payday and, independently fund this sprawling, hyper-ambitious cinematic universe.
The oncology pipeline.
Yeah, something no traditional studio would ever dare greenlight.
It's a useful analogy for understanding the scale of their ambition, for sure.
Mm.
But, the stakes here aren't box office receipts. They're patient survival rates.
Right, it's life or death.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, BioNTech is executing a very explicitly stated strategy in these documents.
Which is?
Becoming a multi-product company by 2030? They aren't interested in being a one-hit wonder at all.
They want to be a permanent fixture.
Exactly. They're systematically converting their mRNA vaccine success into a broad oncology pipeline, designed to transform cancer from a terminal diagnosis into a manageable condition.
And the sheer volume of that pipeline is just staggering. The sources note they are targeting 17 or more late-stage or pivotal trial readouts through the year 2030.
17 late-stage trials. That's huge.
It's an absolute avalanche of clinical data. And it's targeting a massive range of solid tumors, too, like lung, breast, genitourinary.
Gastrointestinal, gynecologic cancers, yeah.
Right. But I have to push back on this strategy for a second.
Okay, go for it.
When you look at an undertaking of that size, ADCs, immuno-oncology, mRNA therapies running simultaneously across 5 different major organ systems, are they spreading themselves too thin?
It's a fair question.
Like, if you're looking at this massive 16.8 billion euro bet, you have to be wondering if this is a calculated siege on cancer or if they are just, throwing incredibly expensive spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Well, what's fascinating here is the underlying biological rationale that demands this kind of scale.
Okay, how so?
Because cancer isn't a single disease, right?
Yeah.
It's hundreds of diseases.
All right.
And more importantly, solid tumors don't just sit there waiting to be attacked. They actively construct this highly complex, hostile neighborhood around themselves.
The tumor microenvironment.
The tumor microenvironment.
So it's essentially a biological fortress.
Precisely. And for decades, standard chemotherapy has basically acted like carpet bombing.
It just destroys everything.
Right. It attacks the tumor, but it damages the healthy tissue around it. And eventually, the tumor mutates and survives anyway.
Which is devastating for the patient.
So BioNTech's strategy, which is highlighted throughout the documents, is a shift toward what they call novel combinations.
Novel combinations, got it.
Yeah. They're running 17 simultaneous trials because they're systematically testing different combinations of highly targeted therapies.
Oh, to figure out exactly how to breach the specific defenses of each unique tumor microenvironment?
Exactly. It's very tailored.
That makes a lot of sense when you look at the specific drugs they're pushing. Like, let's take pumitamig, for example, which they're developing with Bristol-Myers Squibb.
Right. Pumitamig?
The sources describe it as a bispecific immunomodulator targeting PD-L1 and VEGF-A.
It's a mouthful, yeah.
Yeah, but rather than carpet bombing, this sounds like a multi-pronged military siege. Like, the tumor uses PD-L1 like an alarm system to blind the body's immune T cells, right?
Yep, it hides from the immune system.
And it uses VEGF-A to build a dedicated power grid, basically a blood supply, to feed itself.
Exactly.
So a bispecific drug like pumitamig is essentially sending in a hacker to shut down the alarm system while simultaneously sending in a strike team to cut the power grid.
That is exactly how the mechanism works. It hits both pathways.
Wow.
And they initiated 5 pivotal trials for pumitamig in just the first quarter of 2026.
5 trials just for that one drug.
Yeah. They're testing that specific hacker and strike team combination across different types of cancer to see where it's most effective.
That's incredible.
And another major candidate mentioned is consolidate, which they developed with OncoC4.
Right, and that one targets CTLA-4 to cause regulatory T-cell depletion.
Yes, which is another crucial defense mechanism for tumors.
If we stick with the ELI-5 analogies, regulatory T-cells are basically the bouncers of the immune system.
That's a good way to put it.
Like, they're supposed to keep the immune system from getting too aggressive and attacking healthy tissue. But tumors are incredibly sneaky, right?
Very.
They hijack those bouncers and use them as bodyguards. So by targeting CTLA-4, gotistobart depletes those regulatory T cells.
Effectively removing the tumor's bodyguard.
Exactly. So the immune system can actually do its job and attack the cancer.
It is a highly calculated infiltration of the tumor's defenses.
Mm-hmm.
But, understanding the theory is one thing.
Right. The real test is in the clinic.
Exactly. The ultimate question for any oncology pipeline is whether the biological theory actually translates into human survival.
Which brings us to the clinical data they recently presented. And the CEO, Professor Ugur Sahin, framed this perfectly in the update.
Yeah. What does he say?
He stated their absolute focus is to translate our science into survival for patients living with cancer.
It's a powerful statement.
It really is. Let's look at how that translation is actually going, starting with the gotistobart data. This was a phase 3 trial, PRESERVE-003, looking at patients with metastatic squamous non-small cell lung cancer.
And we really need to emphasize the context of a patient in this specific trial.
Right. These aren't early-stage patients.
No, these are heavily pretreated individuals. Their cancer has already progressed after initial rounds of chemotherapy and immunotherapy.
So their tumors have already proven they can outsmart standard medicine.
Exactly. These are very tough cases.
And yet, in this heavily pretreated population, the sources state gotistobart showed a 54% reduction in the risk of death compared to standard docetaxel chemotherapy.
54%.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because in the oncology world, you usually see incremental victories, right?
Yeah, a few weeks here, a few months there.
Exactly. A drug extends life by a few weeks or reduces risk by maybe 10 or 15%. Slashing the risk of death by more than half in advanced lung cancer using a novel mechanism of action that isn't a slow step forward.
No, it's not.
It is a massive leap.
It is a profound efficacy signal. When you remove those hijacked bouncers guarding the tumor, The immune system clearly regains a massive upper hand.
It's so promising.
And that success isn't isolated either. BioNTech also presented phase 12 monotherapy data for pumitamig at the European Lung Cancer Congress.
Also focusing on advanced non-small cell lung cancer, right?
Yes.
And the numbers for pumitamig are equally striking. The sources show a median overall survival of 27.0 months and a median progression-free survival of 13.6 months.
Those numbers are huge in this context.
Furthermore, in the specific subset of patients who had a high expression of that PD-L1 alarm system we talked about, the objective response rate hit 71.4%.
Those metrics represent a literal paradigm shift for patients.
Yeah.
Median overall survival of 27 months means that more than half the people in that trial live well past the 2-year mark.
Wow.
In advanced metastatic lung cancer, that is a monumental milestone. And a progression-free survival of over a year means that for 13.6 months, the cancer was completely halted.
It didn't grow, it didn't spread.
Exactly. It was frozen.
And an objective response rate of 71.4% means that nearly 3/4 of the patients with high PD-L1 saw their tumors physically shrink.
It's tangible proof that the hacker and strike team approach actually works in humans.
And they are seeing positive signals well outside of lung cancer, too. Like the update highlights an antibody-drug conjugate, trastuzumab pamirtecan, developed with Duality Bio.
The ADC program, yeah.
Right. In heavily pretreated patients with HER2 expressing endometrial cancer, they achieved a 49.3% confirmed objective response rate.
So nearly half those patients saw their tumors shrink.
Exactly. The science is undeniably bearing fruit across multiple tumor types.
But, and this is a big but, generating survival data of this magnitude comes at an extraordinary cost.
Oh, for sure. Running global phase 3 clinical trials, managing patient care across multiple continents.
Synthesizing these complex biologic drugs, I mean, it is one of the most capital-intensive endeavors on the planet.
Yeah, you cannot sustain a 17-trial oncology pipeline on passion, and 557 million euro quarterly R&D burns forever. Even with 16.8 billion in the bank. Right. Not without making some incredibly painful choices back in the real world, which forces us to look at the other side of this corporate update.
The ruthless business of curing cancer.
Exactly. Because even with all that cash, BioNTech is enacting a major manufacturing footprint consolidation.
This raises an important question about how the biopharmaceutical industry balances the legacy of the pandemic against the realities of the future.
Because they built up so much infrastructure.
Exactly. During the height of COVID-19, BioNTech had to scale up physical manufacturing at an unprecedented historic pace. They had to build the capacity to literally vaccinate the world.
But now that the demand has normalized, they are holding on to massive, expensive facilities that are no longer operating at maximum capacity.
They're just sitting there burning money.
According to the documents, they are exiting operations at manufacturing sites in Idar Oberstein, Marburg, and Singapore.
Yeah, big facilities.
They are also exiting CureVac's sites in Tübingen, which they had previously acquired. This consolidation is going to affect up to approximately 860 positions.
That's a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
But maintaining idle manufacturing plants burns cash rapidly.
Yeah.
By closing these facilities, BioNTech is stating they will save roughly 500 million euros annually by 2029.
500 million a year.
And the corporate strategy is explicit here. They are taking that 500 million euros and reallocating it directly into advancing the oncology pipeline we just discussed.
They're essentially pruning the branches to feed the roots.
Exactly right.
And in tandem with that, they also announced the authorization of a share repurchase program of up to $1.0 billion over the next 12 months.
To enhance capital efficiency, as they say.
Right. But there is a brutal irony to this consolidation that is just hard to ignore.
How so?
Well, the very manufacturing footprint and presumably hundreds of the dedicated workers that helped pull humanity out of a global public health crisis are now being cut, specifically so the company can afford to build the future of cancer treatment. It highlights just how unsentimental capital allocation has to be when you are targeting 17 late-stage oncology readouts.
It is the stark, unavoidable reality of corporate governance in biotechnology. You have a fiduciary duty to allocate resources where they have the highest probability of generating both scientific breakthroughs and commercial returns.
It's cold, but it's true.
But, the manufacturing footprint isn't the only thing undergoing a radical transformation at BioNTech right now.
Oh, definitely not.
The source material reveals a fundamental shift at the very top of the company, too.
Yes, this was easily the most unexpected part of the update for me. the BioNTech co-founders, Professor Ugur Sahin and Professor Özlem Türeci.
The husband and wife scientific team.
Right, the ones whose ingenuity literally defined the company. They are stepping back to establish a new independent company.
For founders at the helm of a globally recognized, incredibly well-capitalized company to voluntarily initiate an exit of this nature, it's highly unusual.
Very. The sources outline that this new company will focus specifically on next-generation mRNA innovations with what they call disruptive potential.
Disruptive potential.
Yeah. And biotech will actually contribute related rights and technologies to this new entity.
Okay, so they're collaborating.
Yes. Meanwhile, BioNTech itself will remain laser-focused on executing its massive oncology trials and its multi-product goals.
Makes sense.
The timeline states that the founders will transition to managing this new company by the end of 2026, and a global executive search is already underway for their successors at BioNTech.
So they're handing over the reins entirely.
Right. So what does this all mean? The dynamic here reminds me of the life cycle of massive tech giants.
Oh, like a Silicon Valley story.
Exactly. You have visionary founders who build something world-changing in a garage, but eventually the company becomes too big, the regulatory environment becomes too complex, and the daily operations just become too rigid.
It stops being about the science and starts being about the management.
Exactly. So the founders hand over the keys to the seasoned operational executives, the suits, to manage the global enterprise.
While the founders take a chunk of capital and go back to a new garage to invent the next big thing.
Without the burden of running a 16 billion euro corporation.
It makes a lot of sense, honestly. The operational realities of pioneering bleeding-edge science versus managing a commercial pharmaceutical behemoth, they are vastly different.
Very different skill sets.
BioNTech needs operational perfection right now. They need executives who specialize in navigating the FDA, managing global supply chains, and getting 17 complex clinical trials across the finish line on time and under budget.
Right, you need a machine for that.
And Sahin and Türeci are brilliant scientists. Their strength is rapid-fire ingenuity.
Right.
By spinning out a new venture, BioNTech gets the focused, ruthless operational leadership it needs for its oncology pipeline.
While the founders are freed up to push the boundaries of mRNA technology into applications we probably haven't even conceptualized yet, it really is a profound metamorphosis when you step back and look at the entire narrative arc of these Q1 2026 documents.
It's a completely different company now.
It is. BioNTech is taking its 16.8 billion euro COVID windfall and just refusing to play it safe. They are placing a highly calculated, multi-pronged bet on curing solid tumor cancers by 2030.
Using those novel combinations.
Yeah, to hack tumor defenses. And they are generating real-world survival data, like that 54% reduction in risk of death with gotistobart, that proves their biological theories are sound.
The data backs it up.
And they are executing this vision even if it requires the ruthless corporate discipline to close manufacturing sites, cut 1,860 jobs, and completely restructure their foundational leadership.
They're shedding the skin of a pandemic hero to become a permanent global oncology powerhouse.
Perfectly said.
But as we close the book on this deep dive, there is one final thought you should really mull over.
What's that?
BioNTech achieved its historic success and amassed that 16 billion euro war chest precisely because of the unique, unburdened ingenuity of Ugur Sahin and Özlem Türeci during a moment of global crisis.
Right.
Now that they are stepping away to start a fresh venture, can the massive, highly structured corporate machine they leave behind actually maintain that same spark of world-changing innovation as it tackles cancer? Or will the truly disruptive medical breakthroughs of the 2030s end up coming from their new startup back in the garage?
That is a fascinating question to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning the information around you, and we will see you next time.